This week, the Parliamentary Select Committee focused on education and expressed strong condemnation regarding the recent shooting of a school principal in front of both teachers and students in the Eastern Cape. In a separate incident, a group of thugs stormed the home of a nurse from the Efata School for the blind in Mthatha and demanded payment of 50,000 rand. Let's unpack all of this further as we speak to Basil Manuel, who's the Executive Director of NAPTOSA. Basil, thank you so much for joining us this evening. A very scary and dire situation we're finding in our education system as well. When did we get to this point, if you can paint this picture of incidents of shootings and stabbings and even fires at schools?
Master, good evening and thank you for having me. Look, schools have for long been, and they should continue to be, safe spaces. Safe for everybody that is there. Because after all said and done, our children, our most important resource, is there in the school. But of course, as communities change, as society changes, these difficult changes have crept into schools. So we've seen regular break-ins at schools. We've seen schools being torched, if you remember the whole Vianney story. We've seen teachers being attacked. We've seen pupil-on-pupil violence, and it appears to be escalating. Now, I know it's very easy to say, okay, we've had 10, 20, 30 incidents, but we have 20,000 plus 24,000 schools. But that's cold comfort for the community where schools have been attacked and individuals have been attacked. A principal has been killed, others have been shot at and the like. So until the community claims back its space and we stop protecting criminals, because this is part of our problem. Criminals are protected when people don't say anything. Those very criminals turn around and you are the next victim, as we can see happening now. And this is, in our analysis, why we've gotten to this place.
Yeah, and as you say, you know, schools are supposed to be these safe spaces as well. And I guess that's why there hasn't been much of a focus on security when it comes to schools as well. When we're looking at recent incidents, I mean, when I think of the incident with the infamous Pastor Mboro, Mr. Basil, you know, he and his family members, nephew, I believe it was, just walked into the school and they had rifles and pangas, they had weapons on them. But of course, there wouldn't be security or armed or anything of the like waiting at the gates, because who would think that adults would storm into a school and try and take children forcefully so. So are we getting to a point where we need to now be enlisting the services of private security or CPF, community policing forums, to guard schools during school hours?
Martha, in a measure we're there already, because there are some schools that are in very, very difficult to teach at places where communities have fallen apart, where gangsterism is rife, etc. And we do have security provided to those schools. But it is not an ideal. You don't want your school to appear to be a type of a jail. We want our schools to be like churches, open, but even the churches are under attack. We see now that our security has lapsed completely in schools because we didn't need to have such high security. But we've got to address fencing. We've got to address access to the inner sanctum of the school where your children are. There can't be that easy access. And this is what we've put on the table. We've had many talks in the Department of Education, and it's not for a lack of wanting to do things. It's that the problem is so enormous. When you talk about improving fencing, improving security, and you're talking about 20,000 plus schools, you can imagine what a mammoth task that is. And then, of course, on the other hand, it is not all schools that need this. But you can't wait for an incident to happen before you identify a need. Take the school where Mboro them charged him. That school has never had incidents. It's a well-run school. It's a school with a good reputation. Suddenly, it seems like it's a war zone because one person decided to go and do nonsense at the school. And this is what makes it all the more sadder that such incidents happen.
Yeah, and that's an incident where it was an isolated one when we're looking at that Mboro example as well. But then let's look at, you're saying that the areas where we can focus on, where we know that these are schools that are in areas that already have probably like a gang problem as well. For instance, recently what happened in El Dorado Park, where those 2 pupils were also arrested and caught for setting the school alight. Now, a week prior to that incident, there was a stabbing incident at the very same school too. And in the same area that week, there was also another stabbing incident that happened there too. So technically speaking, if there was a stabbing incident at the school or in the area, at schools in the area the week before the school got gutted, there should have been, I would think, some sort of security measure post that incident.
Or a heightened awareness.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not about bringing in the cavalry. It's about being a little more aware, about checking a little more carefully, and of course also talking. Because what we need to do is to convince our own children that there are certain rules of behavior that we should not take for granted. But the heightened awareness also makes us watch out a little more carefully for those other elements that come into school. But when you're just not aware, these things come as a great surprise to you. And you're so right. We should be more aware. We should be taking greater action, particularly when there seems to be a rash of these incidents happening. But Masa, it is a bigger problem than the schools can handle. If the communities aren't with the schools, if the Department of Education isn't assisting schools in gathering the community, if your churches, your temples, your mosques aren't with the schools to gather the community together, the school is not going to succeed. It is something where the community has to reclaim its own place, where its own safety is guaranteed.
Speaking of those solutions as well, following the incident in El Dorado Park, local authorities, the MMC for Public Safety also went to the area, and he had said to address the problem that the residents have raised of this violence in the area, but particularly in the schools as well, the JMB PD Tactical Response Unit will be strengthened in such areas as well. Is that the approach to take too?
In a measure, it is. But the sad thing is, approaches were made before the incident, and they were ignored. And this is my appeal to our policing system. When we do get these reports, let's react. Visibility is the first deterrent. You don't have to do much more than just be visible. And when there are early warning systems and we call people in, if they don't respond, these very people who are going to be the perpetrators think that they have the upper hand. So it is about early warning systems, but it is also about reacting to the calls for help. And if the local people, the local police don't react, then we give them a license to behave in the way they are behaving.
What refuge do parents or family members have when these acts of violence occur on school grounds? And is there any refuge at all? For instance, the principal from the Eastern Cape that was laid to rest today and was gunned down in front of pupils and teachers as well. Can his family then go and perhaps seek legal help, assistance against the department? If it is your child that is involved in an incident where somebody comes in, like we saw what happened, that separate incident with Pastor Mboro, where he just stormed into that school and they had never experienced anything like that. If your child, for instance, is caught in the crossfire of something like that, do you, as a parent, have refuge? Or if you're a family member of an educator, do you have refuge? And who do you take it against? Is it against the school? Is it against the Department of Education?
It is a criminal case, of course, first against the perpetrator. But of course, when it comes to an employee, your employer has an obligation to provide a safe environment. It's in our labor law. So yes, there is recourse. Where children are put into the protective custody of teachers and the school, and by extension, the department. So, yes, I think that people will have to explore their legal options in that respect, because we must hold government to account. We must hold the department to account as much as we hold schools to account. And you know, Martha, when somebody pulls out a gun in a crowd, it's chaos. With the best intention in the world, you can't control those children. They will run into the line of fire because of the shock and trauma that they go through. And there must be a follow-up system, even if nothing has happened, like in the school where Mboro then burst in. Those children need counseling. Some of them have never seen such incidents in their lives. They've never seen a gun. Some of them have heard of things, bad things happen. And if we don't give them the counseling, we're leaving them to work through the trauma themselves, which is not good enough. So it's more than just recourse to the courts, it's also recourse to services that can protect them and that can improve and negate the bad experience that they've had.
And speaking of the counselling as well, pretty often when these incidents happen, the department, whichever department it would be, in this case, the Department of Education will come in and say, look, we've provided counselling for those who've been affected, for the pupils and the teachers as well. But typically, Basil, for how long of a period would that counselling be offered for? Would it be a once-off thing, or would it be monitored frequently over a period of time?
Master, I want to extend the response to say, part of the problem is we don't have resident counsellors. We don't have counsellors that even take charge of a few schools. These people are taking charge of a mass of schools. And of course, they come in there and it's a limited time. But that is not good enough. And I'm agreeing with parents. We've called on the department to improve psychosocial services, not only for the children, for the teachers as well. Our teachers and our children are under far more mental stress today than ever before. So we need to see that they get the correct counseling. This once off 2 days affair and you say, okay, I've done my job, it cannot be good enough because individuals react differently. Some individual, that is good enough. For another one, they need 10, 15, maybe a month's counseling. So we've got to have a better system to deal with the crisis of trauma at our schools.
Basil, always a pleasure engaging with you and hearing your insights. Thank you so much for your time.